Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations when we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators and get to hear firsthand accounts of how these works of art came to be. From their inception, ideas on a page, to completion, where we get to sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. I'm David Smith from the SDSA. I'm so happy to welcome today's guest, set decorator Ellen Brill and production designer Jon Hutman. And we're going to be discussing their collaboration on Being the Ricardos. Good morning, Ellen and Jon, or good afternoon.
Hi, David.
What I'd like to know is, just before we begin, can you just give us a brief discussion or a brief description of how you got started in the business and what brought you to the industry?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you go first. It's a set decorator thing.
Okay, and it's probably shorter than yours. I was in the fashion business for some years, and at one point I just had this epiphany that I ought to go into interior design. I had a friend who was a designer and she had incredible style. And so I went back to school and started studying interior design and had friends that were set decorators. And when I finished my studies, I realized that I wasn't sure how to start an interior design firm. And I was already a little advanced in my age in working, so decided through friends that maybe I would shift gears, and I was offered an internship on a film. And within a few weeks, I became the set decorator. Although it was such an independent film, I literally was the painter and the gardener, the greens guy, and everything. But right after that, I got offered another job and just kept working as a set decorator. So I did work once as a buyer briefly on Pulp Fiction, and I was at a crossroads because I got an offer for a miniseries that I thought would go union, and it did. I left that movie to do that, and I got in the union and never turned back. So that's how I started.
Excellent. And Jon?
I don't know what you mean. I was born a production designer. Sort of.
I know that's not true. But anyway.
I was a theater guy. I was a theater guy in college. I was really into set design. And my father would not pay for me to go to graduate school in theater set design, which I thought was very mean of him. And I had worked on a movie one summer during college, thanks to the kindness of my college roommate, Jodie Foster. And if anyone thinks that connections don't matter, they do. And it was amazing. And it was an amazing experience. It was a movie called Hotel New Hampshire. And what it showed me was that, like, you could kind of do the same thing. And at the time I felt like make a better living. And since my father wouldn't pay for me to go to graduate school, I moved out to LA. I got a job working for Lily Kilvert as a PA on this non-union movie, which was To Live and Die in LA. And because I was working non-union, like Ellen said, I was like, doing location ground plans and aging the cars in the car chase. And that was the beginning of my thing. And I was able to move up very quickly. I designed my first movie, which was Heathers, when I was 25. And I will say I never looked back, but got into the union in a similar sort of, retroactive way, working for this studio called Canon, which doesn't exist anymore. And here we are a few years later, right?
Yeah. And Jon, you came first on this project, right?
I have a relationship with Aaron going back to the West Wing, when he was just a writer and I was still a production designer. And what was funny about that show is I was doing this movie called 13 Days, not the version of that movie that got made, but a version with where Phil Robinson was going to be the director. And we had gotten hold of the White House set from American President, which Lily actually designed. And we were going to sort of adapt that into the Kennedy White House. And the John Wells people who produced West Wing approached approached us and said, is there any way we could shoot a pilot for this TV series on the White House set that you're building? So I started in conversations with Aaron and Tommy. The version of the movie that I was on fell apart. So essentially, literally, I came with the set. The movie fell apart, and that's how I met Aaron Sorkin, and that was 21 years ago.
And I have to say that I went to the screening the other night, and Aaron spoke about you, and he said, somebody asked how he knew you, and he said, well, he did work on West Wing, but the reason I hired him on this was because of Quiz Show.
Which only goes to show you my best work was deeply in my past.
No, I think it was because it had a similar kind of feel.
Yeah. And to be honest, I have literally just come back from New York for the New York premiere of this movie, and a lot of those memories of Quiz Show came back, which was a really, kind, like, not just a similar period, but sort of an equally, just a great, all we do, I believe, is respond to the material that's put in front of us. And I said this at the one of the Q&As for the movie. What I've really appreciated seeing it several times is how strong the screenplay is. And when you start with a screenplay that's as strong as one written by Aaron Sorkin, you don't waste time figuring out the story. Everything is there. And he gave us tremendous creative freedom. People have asked where we got our research and the historical recreations, and the historical recreations are the Lucy sets, and everything outside of that is meant to be more emotionally correct and evocative, I would say, which is kind of what we do. Because the whole thing, to me, again, in terms of the emotional storytelling that we do, it's a story about what happens when your dreams come true. You got everything you wished for and you're still not happy, and now you're afraid of losing it all. And so the script compresses 3 actual things that, crises in their life, which are: Lucy is accused of being a communist. They have to tell the network that she's pregnant with her second child, and she finds evidence that her husband has been cheating on her. So there's all of these 3 things at once. And there's this scene where she comes to the stage with Bill and Viv in the middle of the night, and she has this line where she talks about, what she wanted was just to do this show so she and Desi could be together, because she was like a B-movie actress and he was a band leader, and she thought, like, we'll just get the construction department. That's what she says. She meant the art department and the set decorators, but to build us this little apartment. She said, and so I built this box, and all I have to do to keep it is kill every single week for 36 weeks in a row.
That's really the theme of the whole thing.
That's the movie. That's the story. And so in terms of the emotional palette, which is largely conveyed through color, even, the first thing is, okay, so you're recreating the I Love Lucy set. We chose a very intentionally desaturated palette, which I think gives you the feeling of black and white while being in color. But then in contrast, especially when you go back to the flashbacks, when they meet at Ciro's, when she goes to Charles Kerner's office at RKO, when they meet on the set of Too Many Girls, when they're in Desi's hotel suite at the Chateau, it's all like just rich and lush. And to me, that's the palette of memory. And the other things that happen behind the scenes are much more kind of I would say like clean and simple and contrasty in a way. Anyway, it's not like were like hard and fast rules. For me, it's a lot of instinct that follows the choices that you make. But anyway, that was the kind of the idea behind the palette of the movie.
I looked at a lot of beige and a lot of taupe. I mean, when we were dealing with the later stuff, it was like it's like color, texture became the color in a way, because there were so many variations of taupey, beigey, creamy, silvery, bluey, you know, depending on whose room we were in. But there was always sort of a simple kind of palette per set. This is Desi's office, and Jon wanted his furniture to be a little bit more forward thinking, a little bit that he was more of a modernist, that the look of his was a little bit more towards Mad Men 50s-ish. And this is where we're working with a location that we can't really hang our own art. And we had to be very, very conscientious of how we hung it. Luckily, there is a rail above this like a picture rail in a lot of these. So we had to use it with aircraft cable and hang it with picture rail.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking about Desi's hotel suite, which was a whole, you know, kind of kerfuffle, because we were planning to shoot it at the Chateau Marmont Hotel in their penthouse, and, you know, kind of redo the whole thing. And Jason Swears custom designed this beautiful kind of tropical wallpaper, very specific, warm silver, champagne-y color. But what you can see when you look at these pictures is it's tone on tone on tone, and it's not just silver, it's like warm silver with accents of green and blue, and the tropical plants in the wallpaper tie into the tropical plants that are outside, you know, on the terrace of the hotel. So literally we had the whole thing built, painted, wallpaper, dressed, and there was a labor dispute at the hotel and we couldn't shoot there. So literally we copied the exact location on stage. Thank you, Andres Kubalan and Joey Andreyko, in 11 days. And so what's in the movie was an onstage built replica of the penthouse of the chateau, minus the 6 flights of stairs.
And are there any real bright reds, or did you try to keep the whole thing toward the orange to complement Lucy's hair or anything that psychological?
I think they were really darker. Well, we went rusty in Ciro's. It was like a deep rusty. I think there was always a little bit of depth and more jewel toned.
Except the RKO office is very maroon.
Yeah.
Like the whole palette of this was intentionally rich. And I would say this is a red set, although you could very rightly say that it's, you know, it's like maroon. So yeah. The thing that's interesting when you do these tone on tone sets, you notice how Lucy's dressing room is blue?
Right.
Those of you who know me know I'm not a big blue guy. And I love this dressing room. And it's based on a piece of reference of like a high-end department store of the period.
This was all about silvery, metally, like all the metals were silver gold or antique gold. There wasn't really any wood that wasn't painted in this set. The dressing table in the corner, that was custom made. I ended up putting an antique mirrored top to it because it wasn't quite finished looking. There was a lot of custom work on this. The chaise was purchased and custom upholstered. All these chairs were purchased and custom upholstered. That's what I like to do. There was a lot of custom work on this movie.
Yeah.
And with an interior design background, this is kind of my jam, you know. So
you should give Ruben a shout out.
Oh yes, Ruben Abarca, our draper, was phenomenal doing these. And one of the harder parts of working in some of these more historical locations, even though we built most of the walls within this space, you cannot attach curtains or drapery or things sometimes to walls. So there are uprights, wood uprights that are on either side of the drapery that he had to install in most rooms to attach the drapery to, because you can't go into the walls. And the living room set that we did in a house in Pasadena, they were adamant. And we really struggled in some of the locations to make sure that it looked right. You didn't see the wood. We had to paint it out, do all that. So, and that they didn't fall on the actors.
It's a shame that you don't really see their living room very much, because the way Aaron shot the opening it was about being focused on the radio and Walter Winchell's broadcast, and there's one wide shot, but I had found this piece of reference. The question was, how do you do the 50s in a way that puts you in the period without kind of falling into these familiar tropes, right? Mm-hmm. And I found this image of this woman with these incredibly theatrical chintz floral drapes, and that was the idea. And Ellen would go out and like, with the internet, like I'm worse than seriously. I'm worse. And what about this? And she's like, just give me a minute. And she found these, like, the drapes are so good. And it was something that you would only do in the 50s, but it doesn't make the room feel like a diner. Do you know what I'm saying? Right. Like in terms of those kind of cliche tropes of the period.
And what number is this of the projects that you've done together, Ellen?
I think it's about our 5th or 6th. We have done a few commercials. We did a music video. We've done a few films. We've done a pilot. So we've kind of run the gamut of different styles and types.
Yeah, but I would say mainly, I mean, David, you've worked with me. You know that I work, there are some production designers who will like leave it to you the way Aaron left it to us. I am not that guy. Right. I am extremely involved and collaborative. I don't know how to choose the wall colors until we together have figured out the curtains and the rugs and that's the job, I think, is coordinating the look of the whole thing, and not just what does this set look like, but how does that piece of the puzzle fit into telling of the whole story. And so I have to say what I love about working with Jon, it is so collaborative that, he'll say, well, what fabric, did you see anything really great out there curtain wise, or this or that? Or I found these curtains, which he did. He was scouting a location and found this set of curtains, and they were tearing the house apart. And he sent me I wasn't even on. He goes, I can buy these curtains, a drapery. It was like serious drapery. I can buy these for like $500 for the 2 windows worth. Should I get them? I'm like, Jon, I haven't started. I said, yeah, they're cool. Get them. And that was the impetus to jump off for Vivian's dressing room, because that's where we decided they would fit. And it was the color that I just ran with. And it was this peachy pinky space that it just gave me the inspiration, which I hope to give him. And it's a mutual, how do we come to where we need to go with it? Yeah.
Did you have a fair amount of prep time? Was it a tight shooting schedule?
We had a fair amount of prep time, I felt. Enough, yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what worked, because we're kind of doing a version of the same thing now. I was on with Lori Bolton, the location scout, before Christmas. So by the time we broke for Christmas, I had taken Aaron scouting, like, I would say like the exterior of the house location changed, and maybe the exterior of Ciro's location changed, but we went into prep with a clear idea of what we were doing. And so I don't think you can necessarily say, because we've all been on movies where you prep for 6 months and you're just chasing your tail, and then you end up jamming in the last 4 weeks anyway. Right. I think that don't you think, Elle? I think we only had like 8 weeks of prep, don't you?
Yeah, 8 or 9.
8 or 9 weeks, but we started on day 1 with like, here's the art department scout, here's the places we're shooting, here's plans of what each of the sets are going to look like, and here's references. I'm big on these reference briefs set by set, which provide a lot of like catch up for everybody else to what my thinking is. And then, to me, like the collaboration is a lot like tennis. Like, I'll take it to a certain point based on the script, get some feedback from the director, and then I throw it out there, and Ellen brings her stuff, and Andres and the set designers bring their stuff, and then you try to make it work within the numbers that you've agreed on. But I think I'm going to say for myself, but I think for our crew and really the whole crew, it was a really, really positive experience. Making this movie was one of those things that you dream of, where you really feel like everyone is on the same team, like everybody is working toward the same end. And our cinematographer, Jeff Cronenweth, who we had not worked with before, who used to do all of Fincher's films, he and his crew were so great. And again, just collaborative with us. Like all of the lighting fixtures on the soundstage obviously had to be period incandescent lighting, which you can still rent from, I don't know whether it's from Mole Richardson or someplace. And the green beds came from like the Paramount grip department, and they're not from I Love Lucy, but they're from the Lucy show, which was one incarnation later. And we actually built a lot of these scoop lights that you see like in this shot. Those are these troughs that we built for them, which are essentially period correct, and they work for the DP. So that's our thing.
And just curious, were these incandescent fully?
Oh,
or
yeah.
LED?
All
Okay.
incandescent, all incandescent. The other thing he had us do though, like there's that scene where Lucy and Madeline are talking outside the writer's room, and they're kind of at a dead end hallway, and he's like, oh, what am I gonna do? And we literally built him a light box window at the end of that hallway and another one outside of Desi's office. You know, so he
He had really interesting technique of a way to bring in light that not just practicals, but to actually build some structural light in.
But he also, like, it wasn't like he figured it out the day we were shooting. Like everyone had a very clear plan well in advance. So when we showed up on the day, there weren't surprises, which is something that you don't often hear.
Really, my crew said that this is the best job that they'd ever been on, or that they'd been on in 10 years or something. There was something very, and I agree. I think it comes from having a very concise idea of a script that is fantastic. And it just seemed kind of magical in that they were really fun sets to do. There was great research done. I have to say, I learned early on, the sooner you make a decision, the better, because the more developed it can get. And I think that's why when Jon does these visual references that are so telling of what you need to look for, that's when you really know where, you're directed.
And looking at the photos and seeing the movie, I saw the movie first and then I saw the photos. I know some things, well, for all of us, we never see quite everything that we do, and you just hope that what you do see is correct. But is there anything that was your favorite that didn't make the movie, or are you pleased overall about how much you do see?
I did hear that Aaron said, one of the questions with the interviewer the other night was, Aaron seems to write about workplace a lot, and he's really comfortable. And he said that when he has to write home, he freezes and he can hardly write about stuff that happens in a house, weirdly. So it's like 2 times that we're in the house, we're hardly in the house or outside the house. I mean, it's really interesting because.
But sorry, come on. I made it like 15 minutes in without interrupting. That laundry room, which again you don't see very much of, but you do, like, you see enough of that wallpaper and enough of the scalloped trim in that kind of like sort of dull pink, and those Priscilla drapes, just enough, and to me, like, exactly where you are. There were a couple of murals in the CBS commissary and conference room, and they were sort of by definition opposite the windows. And Jeff always likes to favor, the windows behind the actors for lighting purposes. But I have to say, overall, I definitely felt like you saw the world that we created. And the other thing I'll say is that, what Aaron is really great at and interested in are the words and the scenes between people. And so there was always like a little tiny concern that the movie would feel too interior and that you wouldn't understand the larger shape of the world. And I think that you actually do just enough. I think you get the outside of their house. I think you get that alley. Like, one of my favorite things was this alley across the street from the bar where she goes to have a drink in the middle of the day with Bill, which just gives you a sense of like, oh, the back gate of the studio and the canteen across the street, and which is such a real thing. And I feel like there was just enough to help you understand the shape of the world and for the film not to feel claustrophobic.
What I was amazed, quite honestly, is that he did not shoot very long days, and he didn't take a ton of takes on. It was so close to the bone because, being the writer director, he really knew what he wanted to get, and I kept thinking he wasn't getting enough. But when I saw it, I was like, oh God, really? The only thing that I saw more of on dailies, in a way, was that grape stomping scene, which was funny, and she. Evidently, Nicole had studied it, move by move, and had rehearsed the whole thing in her head. And then she was busy doing it, and it was hilarious. Everybody was laughing, and Aaron started laughing, and he said, "Cut." And she said, "What? I'm not done." And he goes, "What?" And she goes, "No, I have the whole thing rehearsed." And so he's like, "Oh, okay, keep rolling." And so she did more, but it didn't end up in the movie. It's almost like he really knew what he needed to get.
And where were you based? Did you have stages at
Sunset Gower? Sunset Gower.
Sunset Gower.
Yeah. So the sound stage, the hallway outside the sound stage where you see Desi walking with the writers, and that alley where Lucy and Viv and Bill are talking with Madeline while they're waiting tensely to find out if they're going to tape the show. All of that is Sunset Gower. And then pretty much all of the studio office interiors are at the old Wilshire Ebell, which, we've all shot at 10 times before. But I think we did a pretty good job of using it in ways that didn't, that didn't feel too familiar. And what was great, you have to remember, we shot this during COVID. We were not vaccinated. We were tested every day. But as we all know, there's a huge footprint that now comes with the requirements of, testing and catering and all of that stuff. So part of the reason for shooting everything under one roof was practical, but also just creatively, you could literally walk out of Lucy's dressing room, walk down the hallway. The wardrobe room is on the right. Viv's dressing room is here. Bill's dressing room is here. Desi's office is around the corner. You go down the stairs and you've got the writer's room and Jess's office. And so, and what you understand is that if you go down to the ground floor, you walk out a door, as Desi and the writers do, and that connects you to the soundstage.
This was a tracking shot really through the whole back of the stage. So we had we had paint cans and all sorts of, we had some wardrobe, and we had some dressing tables, and just having enough period gack, like all the ladders, and of course the booms and the cameras were working, but having that stuff just to have shapes to light behind, that's something that when you first start, sometimes you don't realize how important some of that set dressing is. Then we walked through the bandstands, which we all did. We did all the bandstands custom, and that was leading into the stage. So whenever you do a walk and talk, it's always, you see the world. Yeah.
Well, and this must have been fun because of the history. I mean, just because of how much indeed Desi Arnaz changed the industry and brought about, the reruns and shooting shows like this. And it just must have been fun to see and go and know all of that, and then to find things that you could use and didn't use.
And I grew up watching, I'm dating myself, but I watched all of those shows. So, I mean, it's like in my DNA almost. It's ingrained. And I have to say, growing up in the 50s, you know, my parents' house looked similar. I kept saying to John, we had this dark green ivy wallpaper in our dining room, you know, with this, you know, kind of mahogany furniture. That's where I got the feeling for their house.
One of my favorite stills, and I don't know that I actually noticed it in the movie so much, the sign, but the Lucy and the Lucy Desi Playhouse, I think the sign says.
Desi Lou Playhouse.
What was the real history of Desi Lou? I know at one point that it was on Cahuenga, correct? Wasn't that sort of like?
So as the show took off and became successful, Desi Lou, their production company, bought the old RKO lots. So there were 3 movie studios, which included what is now the Culver Studios, but it had a 40-acre backlot. And there's this clip that you can find on YouTube of them like in a helicopter going over like the world that they surveyed. But like he was just very forward thinking in terms of what the medium of television would turn into. But you are correct. The first studio that they acquired is, you know, it's now called the Red Studios. Before it was called Renmar. That's the Cahuenga one. Lucy was shot in what is now, it used to be called Hollywood Center. It was the old Zoetrope. It's now, I think, called Sunset Las Palmas, like the Sunset Group managed Sunset Bronson, Sunset Gower, and Sunset Las Palmas. So that's where they actually were. We chose the Sunset Gower lot just because you can see like the stages are still old with the asbestos soundproof. It just, you know, it was the old Columbia Studios, and there's a feeling that you get when you're on that lot, I believe, that has been renovated out of a lot of the old lots.
I just finished a movie at Sunset Gower, and I agree. It's it does feel wonderful. You know, it just there's a lot of history there.
Yeah.
So Ellen and John both. This was obviously an incredible project to do in town, and not to take it to some other city and try to recreate Los Angeles. But Ellen, you must have used an incredible number of local vendors.
I have a list.
Excellent.
I have to say I used Omega quite a bit. They built a lot of things. They reupholstered a lot. They built the dressing table for me. They made the headboard for the bed, the hotel. I bought a lot on Cherish and had things delivered from all over the country. I used Alpha. I used Fabricut fabrics. I used Cravat fabrics. I used Faux Library. We used Hand Prop Room. History for Hire, of course. We used for the cameras, the booms, all that kind of thing. HSG did a lot of our framing, and so did You Frame It. We used Sony, we used Premiere, we used Warner Brothers. I mean, fortunately, I had fantastic buyers. I had Kathleen Rosen and Christine Staggs, and we canvassed the antique malls and all the prop houses. I mean, I could go on. Modernica, Lenny Marvin, Practical Props, RC Vintage, Sandy Rose Floral, you know, really just through a wide net. We were also very lucky to find a gentleman who did some of the colorization on the original I Love Lucy's, and he has some of a collection. So we got his table, his coffee table, which we could not find anywhere in the world, an original like the one in the living room. And he loaned us, or we rented some pieces for the kitchen that were absolutely original, that were the pieces that were originally there. One of the hardest things to find were the lusters, which were these kind of candlestick pieces on the piano. We looked everywhere, we searched everywhere, and we could not find anything similar. He happened to have a pair.
Amazing.
It was amazing. I mean, so for the set, we tried to be for the actual I Love Lucy set. We tried to be as close to original as possible. Really, really. I mean, their wallpaper was identical. The artwork that we had for above the beds, we made the whole bed set, even though we were never in the room. We want, because we knew it would be in the background.
And Ellen, the lamps on the table read. I know how bloody difficult those are to find and to find in quantity. How did you do that?
We found them at Practical Props.
All of them?
Yeah, I think so. What was the challenge were the tables, because most tables, folding tables these days, are plastic or laminate, and Jon really wanted wood. And I liked the idea of having the metal edge.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I was going to say they have the metal edge. Yeah.
And I looked everywhere, and tried to find them in prop houses or in party rentals, but none of them looked good enough because they were so beat up, and usually they have tablecloths. So I found a school outfitters place in the middle of the country, and these looked appropriate and I liked them. We ended up changing the color of the wood slightly. We made it a little bit darker, but they weighed a ton, and we didn't have a lot. They make them custom to order, and we didn't have a lot of time. I mean, I think I had 8 weeks or maybe 6 by the time I found them, and they said it was going to be at least 5 weeks to get them, and this was up first. And that's part of what's scary about what we do sometimes, is like you finally find the thing you want and you just don't know if you're going to get it. And it was COVID.
Right.
You know, I think now because things have gotten so backed up, we probably wouldn't have gone.
No, I don't think so either. Because it's only gotten worse. Every 2 weeks, it's worse than it was before. And Ellen, what was your favorite set? If you had to choose just one, or give me 3. And
I really loved it was weird. It's sort of a thrown together set in my head. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, and it just came together. That was the radio station dressing room. There was something about that I just loved. Mm. I loved how they shot it. I loved how it looked when the men from CBS walked in. I loved Lucy's dressing room as well. I thought it just came out, and it was funny because we kept with those blues and those aqua blues and that kind of little bit of pink and mauve. Jon and I kind of were like, oh, I don't know. And then I found this Art Deco rug that kind of just pulled it all together for me. And so I love that. And there really wasn't a set I didn't love.
I loved the Too Many Girls set, which is the film set of the movie where Lucy and Desi met. And the set is a kind of condensed version of what it's this I'm not kidding you, terrible musical that's set at a college in New Mexico. And but there was just something about like the old painted backdrops and the stucco walls and, you know, those fake cactuses that you walk by at Greenset I've been doing this for a long time, walking by those fake cactuses and going like, who uses those things? And you truck them out and you touch up the paint. But there was something like, literally, Nicole called me down to the set that day and just said like, this is magical. And I would say not one of our, they're all a little obsessive, but not one of the most obsessive sets. And I thought there was something just wonderful about that.
I have to add, I really thought Ciro's came together beautifully. Oh. When I first saw that, the first shot of that when I saw the movie, I was like, oh my God, I got chills. And it's like, oh, this is movie making.
And Ciro's was shot at the Queen Mary as well?
Yeah. Ciro's, Charles Kerner's, the RKO president's office, was in the salon next door. And then upstairs, we shot the CBS commissary and conference room.
And then the bar, the little...
and the interview in the bar, the interview with Bob.
Yeah. So were you there for 2 weeks?
No, we were there for I think we were there for 4 days. I mean...
Oh my God.
CBS, didn't they shoot both of the... I think
One
those
day.
were...
One day.
everything was one day. RKO was one day. CBS, I think they shot both parts of that in one day. And Ciro's,
I think Ciro's they did 2 days.
2 days? Yeah.
I think so. Well, we redressed that. Remember, that was going to be the interview, and then he decided he didn't want to do it there, and we moved it up to the bar. So we scrambled to get the bar dressed. But
I remember.
I mean, we prepped a little. We had 4 days of prep, something like that.
Oh,
more than that.
We had construction prep there for weeks. Because what you don't realize about the Queen Mary is that you're 8 stories in the air, and so Joey brought in a construction crane to lift everything up onto that deck. And once it got up there, it was fine. But I mean, I remember JJ, the construction foreman, so the space of Charles Kerner's office was there. And we were just kind of like plugging the spaces in between the columns. And it seemed like a straightforward thing, except it's a ship. And what you don't realize until you go there is that everything is like built. I don't mean like a little angle. I mean like a foot height difference from one side to the other. Anyway, I'm the
really hard to hang art.
I'm like, get it close and I'll come and tell you where to put the molding. They did an amazing job.
Yeah, hanging the art in the waiting room when she's waiting to go into his office, that was a challenge because everything is a little tippy.
No, it's not a little, it's like
a lot.
Crazy. It's crazy.
It's sinking. Unfortunately, it's sinking, and it's such a beautiful piece of Art Deco. It's very sad.
Yeah. And just getting the 10 booths up there, that must have been an incredible challenge. I mean, thank God for the crane,
Well, yeah, and I think his desk came up on the crane too. There were a few things that were too huge because it's 4 stories or 5 stories of stairs. And there's just no way you can get this really heavy stuff up there.
And of course, I recognized a fair amount of furniture and rentals, but I didn't know the desk in the RK office. Was that built or bought?
No, that actually came from Alpha, from Spellman. Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. Looks great.
And that was like, the furniture was this great Art Deco set of like this, the couches and the 2 chairs, which I believe came from Sony.
Yeah.
But the desk, what was so good about that desk is it's not another Art Deco. Like it would be so easy to turn it into the Art Deco matchy match, but it's like very traditional and total, like spot on appropriate. That desk and the passenger chairs, there was just a lovely balance that I think kept it grounded.
I agree.
Yeah.
Anyway, you guys, the movie looks great. As we said earlier, we know that you two do incredible work. I'm jealous as hell, but pleased for both of you. and I think it must have been great fun to do something in period, and be able to make it here and to have access to so many things. So.
Well, it's my favorite period. So when I heard about this job months before Jon got the job, and when
what she's trying to say is when some other designer was
okay, I want names later. Okay.
And then when he called and he said, I got this job and it's about, and I was like, are you kidding me? And then I was fortunate enough to get asked to do it.
Yeah, it's great.
There you go.
It's really terrific. Well, I think we should wrap this up. Our time is up, but thank you very much. So nice to talk to both of you.
David, thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Inside the Set with Set Decor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.